I'm Rosa Harrison, 34 years old, and I was back home for Thanksgiving dinner. In my family gatherings were always showcases for achievements. My sister, the doctor, my brother, the banker, and me, the furniture designer, who wasn't quite making it. I didn't know that night would change everything. When my dad lifted his glass and said those words, something broke and rebuilt inside me. The journey from that Boston dining table to my workshop in Portland spans more than just 3,000 miles. It's about finding where I truly belong. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding your own path. Growing up in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, achievement wasn't just encouraged in the Harrison household. It was expected. My father, Thomas, was a corporate lawyer whose clients included some of the biggest names in tech and pharmaceuticals. His corner office downtown had a view of the harbor, and his reputation for aggressive negotiation preceded him in every boardroom. At home, that same intensity translated into high expectations for his children. My mother, Janet, had been a successful pediatrician before scaling back to part-time work when we were born. While more nurturing than my father, she shared his belief that success came in very specific packages. Prestigious degrees, impressive job titles, and the financial security that came with conventional career paths. She was the buffer between my father's blunt assessments and our tender egos, but she rarely contradicted his fundamental worldview. My sister Allison followed our mother's footsteps into medicine, graduating at the top of her class and securing a residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. 2 years older than me, she was always the example held up for me to follow. Organized, disciplined, and practical. She approached life like a checklist to be completed efficiently. My brother David, 4 years my senior, was my father's pride. He'd gone to Wharton for his MBA and climbed quickly at a Manhattan investment firm. His Christmas gifts were always generous, his vacations enviable, and his apartment featured in a design magazine. Success by every metric my parents valued. And then there was me, the youngest, the different one. I discovered woodworking in our neighbor's garage when I was 9. Mr. Abernathy was a retired furniture maker who let me watch him transform raw lumber into beautiful functional pieces. While other girls requested dolls and electronic games for birthdays, I asked for tools, much to my parents' confusion. By 12, I'd made my first small table wobbly but mine. My father examined it, pointed out the uneven legs, and asked if I'd thought about joining the debate team instead. "You have such a sharp mind, Rosa," he said, setting the table aside. "Why waste it on hobby crafts?" Family dinners became a showcase for achievements. Allison's academic awards and David's internship offers dominated conversation while I pushed food around my plate. When I tried to share excitement about a new joinery technique I'd learned, eyes would glaze over. "That's nice, dear," my mother would say before turning to David. "Now tell us more about that meeting with the executive board." My art teacher, Mrs. Lawson, was the first person who saw potential in what I loved. She displayed my carved jewelry box in the school showcase and nominated me for a Young Artists program. "You have a gift for seeing the soul in the wood," she told me after class one day. "Not everyone can do that." When college application season arrived, the expected path was clear. Business school like David or pre-med like Allison. I applied to Rhode Island School of Design instead. The argument that followed my acceptance letter was the first time I'd ever seen my father truly speechless with disappointment. Art school. He finally managed the letter dangling from his fingers like something contaminated. "What exactly is the return on investment for that?" "It's what I love, Dad." I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Love doesn't pay student loans," he countered. They did pay for RISD eventually after my mother intervened. But every tuition check came with comments about how it could have been Harvard or Yale, about the waste of potential, about the difficult road ahead for someone making lifestyle choices instead of career ones. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove them wrong. My focus on furniture design raised eyebrows even at art school, where most classmates were pursuing more commercial fields like graphic design or illustration. But I loved the honesty of wood, the way each piece had its own character, that a sensitive craftsperson could reveal rather than impose. My senior showcase featured a writing desk that earned praise from instructors and visitors alike. My parents attended standing awkwardly among the bohemian crowd. "It's very unique," my mother offered. "Can you mass-produce something like this?" my father asked. "Otherwise, how will you scale the business?" I didn't have answers that would satisfy him. I just knew I wanted to create beautiful, useful objects that would become part of people's lives, that would hold their stories and grow more meaningful with time. The distance between my family's expectations and my aspirations grew into a chasm. Each holiday return home, each Sunday phone call, each family celebration became an exercise in deflection and disappointment. I began dreading the inevitable questions about my career progress, knowing nothing I said would measure up to the Harrison standard of success. After graduation, the real world hit hard. My classmates pursuing graphic design and illustration found entry-level jobs at agencies or freelance gigs that at least paid rent. Custom furniture design was different. It required workshop space, expensive tools, and clients willing to pay for handcrafted quality in an IKEA world. I found a tiny apartment in Boston's Jamaica Plain neighborhood that had a detached garage I could convert into a modest workshop. The rent consumed nearly 2/3 of my income, which came primarily from waitressing at an upscale restaurant downtown. I worked morning shifts at a coffee shop too, saving tips in a jar labeled Table Saw Fund. My hands, once soft and uncalloused, became workers' hands. Nicked from sharp tools, stained from various finishes, strong from carrying lumber and operating machinery. I was proud of these changes, seeing them as badges of authentic craftsmanship. My mother noticed them during a family dinner and quietly slipped me a tube of expensive hand cream afterward. "You should take care of yourself," she said. "First impressions matter in professional settings." It was a small comment, but revealed so much about the gulf between us. To her, my hands signaled neglect rather than dedication. Anytime Allison or David shared news, a promotion, a bonus, a new apartment, my parents beamed with vicarious pride. Their success validated the family values, the emphasis on conventional achievement. My small victories, a commission from a local coffee shop owner, a feature on a small design blog, received polite nods, but little true enthusiasm. Phone calls with my mother followed a pattern. After updating me on family news, she'd inevitably turn to my situation. "Have you thought more about that graphic design certificate program I sent you? It could be a way to use your artistic skills in a more reliable field." Or, "Laura's daughter just got hired at that marketing agency downtown. She majored in art history but took some business courses. They're always looking for creative types with practical skills." Each suggestion carried the same subtext. What you're doing isn't working. Change course. Be practical. After 2 years of scraping by, I got what seemed like my big break. A commission to design and build custom shelving units for a new boutique hotel downtown. The deposit would cover materials and 3 months' rent. I created detailed sketches, sourced the perfect reclaimed oak, and began construction. 2 weeks in the hotel, ownership changed hands. The new management team had different design ideas. My contract was canceled with a partial payment that barely covered the materials I'd already purchased. That night I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by expensive wood I couldn't return and bills I couldn't pay. When my landlord called about the late rent, I made the call I'd promised myself I'd never make. "Dad, I need help." Moving back to my childhood bedroom at 32 felt like the ultimate failure. My carefully constructed independence collapsed under financial reality. My father didn't lecture me directly, but his silent, "I told you so," filled every room of the house. My mother tried to make it comfortable, assuring me many millennials were living with parents these days, but her eyes held concern rather than conviction. I converted a corner of the garage into a small workspace, careful to keep my tools organized and my projects contained. I took a job at a furniture restoration shop 30 minutes away, learning valuable techniques while earning barely above minimum wage. Evenings and weekends I worked on small commissions, cutting boards, jewelry boxes, occasional side tables. selling them through local craft fairs and Etsy. Determined to contribute to the household, I designed and built a custom bookcase for my father's study. Figured maple with dovetail joints and hidden compartments for his rare whiskey collection. I spent 6 weekends crafting it, pouring all my skill and hope into the piece. When I unveiled it, he nodded, thanked me, and helped move it into position. Then he immediately filled it with his leather-bound law books and family photos, never mentioning the craftsmanship or the thoughtful details I'd included specifically for him. It became simply functional, invisible as furniture often is when it's doing its job well. I told myself this was fine. Good furniture should serve without drawing attention. But a small acknowledgement of the artistry, the hours the love put into the wood, would have meant everything. At night, I applied for jobs, grants, residencies, anything that might provide escape velocity from my parents' orbit. I maintained a brave face during family dinners, describing my small projects with feigned enthusiasm, while my mother asked pointed questions about health insurance and retirement savings. The invisibility I felt was most acute in those moments. Present at the table, but somehow not seen, not fully recognized as the adult I was. My path was viewed as a phase to outgrow, rather than a calling to respect. I existed in a liminal space between daughter and tenant, between aspiration and resignation. When an acquaintance from RISD posted about Portland's thriving artisan community and mentioned an upcoming workshop position, I bookmarked the post but didn't apply. The thought of moving across the country seemed impossible. Financially, logistically, emotionally. Portland was for people with confidence and clarity, not failed furniture designers sleeping in twin beds under high school participation trophies. Besides, Thanksgiving was approaching, and the entire extended Harrison family would gather as they did every year. Perhaps this time would be different. Perhaps this time I'd find the words to make them understand who I was and what I was trying to build. The Harrison family Thanksgiving was an institution, a performance of tradition and success repeated annually with only minor variations in the script. This year my mother had been preparing for days. Polishing the silver, pressing the linen napkins, ordering the organic heritage turkey from the specialty butcher in Cambridge. I helped in the kitchen, grateful for the clear purpose of assigned tasks. Chop these vegetables. Stir this sauce. Roll this dough. In the kitchen, at least, my hands knew what to do and did it well. My mother worked alongside me, filling the silences with updates on relatives and neighbors. Aunt Patricia is bringing her new boyfriend. Divorced, finance background, 2 college-age children, she reported. And the Whitcombs next door just sent their youngest to Stanford. Early decision. I nodded, focusing on the perfect brunoise of celery for the stuffing. Achievement was the family currency, and I was perpetually overdrawn. Around 4 o'clock, the first arrivals started. Allison and her husband, Michael, were first bringing wine and flowers. Allison's cashmere sweater draped perfectly over her small but unmistakable baby bump. The newest achievement she'd be announcing officially tonight. She'd already told our parents, of course. Good news was never wasted on just immediate family when there could be an audience. David arrived from New York by private car service, his girlfriend Natalie in tow. She worked in art acquisitions for corporate collections, and always regarded me with the curious interest of an anthropologist studying a strange tribe. They brought stories of gallery openings, charity galas, and the closing on their new Manhattan apartment with views of Central Park. Extended family trickled in. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all carrying side dishes and success stories to share at the table. I greeted everyone with practiced smiles, accepting the one-armed hugs and inevitable questions. Rosa still making your little furniture pieces? My father's brother clapped my shoulder. What are you up to these days? Asked a cousin who knew perfectly well what I was up to because nothing had changed since last Thanksgiving. I mentioned a small gallery show where I'd sold a few pieces, but my voice was drowned out by my aunt announcing her son's law partnership. The familiar knot formed in my throat. Not quite tears, not quite anger, something like resignation crystallized over years of similar moments. The dining room gleamed under chandelier light, the long mahogany table extending to accommodate 22 people. Place cards in my mother's perfect calligraphy, assigned each person their proper place in the Harrison hierarchy. I found mine at the far end beside a second cousin's teenager and my mother's childhood friend who was hard of hearing. My father stood at the head of the table, carving knife poised above the turkey. My mother sat at the opposite end, ready to direct the synchronized passing of side dishes. The family ritual commenced with efficiency born of repetition. Before eating, our tradition included toasts. My father raised his wineglass, commanding attention with his courtroom presence. "To family," he began, scanning the faces looking back at him. "Our greatest achievement and legacy." Glasses raised in unison. Then he continued with personalized acknowledgments. "To Allison and Michael," he said, voice warm with pride, "who will welcome the next generation of Harrisons this spring. To brilliant genes and the promise of continuation." Allison beamed as congratulations erupted. Her free hand rested protectively on her stomach. "To David," my father continued when the excitement quieted, "whose recent promotion makes him the youngest senior manager in his firm's history, and to the Manhattan apartment that I'm told has a guest room with my name on it." Laughter and applause as David raised his glass in acknowledgement, his smile confident and easy. My father's gaze continued around the table, offering personalized recognition to various family members. My cousin's academic fellowship, my aunt's recent retirement, my uncle's golf championship. Finally, his eyes landed on me. The table quieted in anticipation. I straightened slightly, wondering what he might highlight. The bookcase. The gallery show. Perhaps just generic well wishes. He lifted his glass higher. "And a toast to different paths," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Some kids make you proud. Others just take up space." The laughter rippled around the table, starting with my father and spreading outward like a wave. Not cruel laughter, but the comfortable chuckling of people who saw nothing wrong with the joke, who perhaps didn't even register it as being at my expense specifically. Just good-natured family ribbing. Except it wasn't, and everyone knew it. Heat flooded my face, but something cold and clarifying flooded my mind. Years of similar comments, dismissals, and gentle redirections crystallized in that single moment. I wasn't a project to fix or a phase to wait out. I was a person they simply couldn't see. I looked at my father, directly summoning calm I didn't know I possessed. My voice carried clearly across the suddenly quieting table. "Good thing I just got my own place 3,000 miles away." The silence was immediate and total. Forks paused midway to mouths, eyes widened. My mother's hand flew to her throat. I placed my napkin beside my untouched plate, stood up smoothly, and walked out of the dining room with measured steps. No drama, no tears, just the quiet dignity of someone who finally understands the situation completely. Behind me, conversation erupted in confused bursts. I didn't turn back. There was nothing more to say to a table where I'd never had a proper place. In my childhood bedroom, surrounded by relics of a person I no longer was, I began methodically packing a suitcase. The clarity I felt was almost dizzying, like stepping from a dark, cluttered room into sunlight and open space. I pulled out my laptop and searched for the post about Portland. The workshop position was still open. An assistant role with Julia Winters, a furniture maker known for sculptural pieces that blended function with fine art. The pay was minimal, but included workshop access and mentorship. Housing not included. 3,000 miles. The number I'd thrown out at dinner wasn't random. Portland had been a whisper in my mind for months, the promised land of artisanal craft and community. A place where making things by hand wasn't seen as quaint or impractical, but valued and supported. I scrolled through apartment listings, calculating costs against my meager savings. It would be tight, impossibly tight, but perhaps no more impossible than staying here, slowly disappearing into the background of the Harrison family portrait. A soft knock interrupted my planning. My mother entered without waiting for response, her face lined with concern. "Rosa, honey." Dad didn't mean it the way it sounded. I looked up from my laptop. Yes, he did. He absolutely did. "He's just worried about you. We both are." This furniture thing, she gestured, vaguely unable to even name my passion properly. It's been such a struggle for you. It's been a struggle partly because no one in this family has ever taken it seriously. I continued, folding clothes into the suitcase. Did you ever wonder why David succeeded so quickly? Why Allison moved so smoothly into her career? They worked hard, my mother said automatically. They did. And they had something else too. The complete confidence of this family behind them. No one ever questioned their choices or suggested alternatives or treated their careers like temporary diversions. My mother sat on the edge of the bed and hands twisting in her lap. We just want security for you. Happiness. No, you want me to want what would make you happy. There's a difference. I showed her the workshop posting the apartment listings, the vibrant Portland art scene websites. I've been thinking about this move for a while. Tonight just made the decision easier. 3,000 miles is so far, she said softly. That's kind of the point. We sat in silence for a moment, the gulf between us wider than ever, yet somehow more honest than it had been in years. Will you be okay financially? She finally asked. I'll figure it out. I always do. She nodded, stood up, and moved toward the door. Paused. Your father won't apologize. You know that. I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm making a change. After she left, I worked until dawn, applying for the workshop position, researching the drive west, calculating gas costs and motel rates, taking inventory of what I could fit in my 10-year-old Subaru and what I'd have to leave behind. At 2:17 a.m., I sent my application to Julia Winters with a cover letter explaining my background, my aesthetic philosophy, and my readiness to commit completely to a new opportunity. I attached photos of my best work, including the bookcase my father had barely acknowledged. I expected to wait days for a response. The reply came at 6:48 a.m. Your joinery is exceptional. Workshop needs another set of hands starting January. Pay is low, but learning is high. Portland housing is tough, but I know people. Call me. Julia. By the time the household stirred the next morning, my decision was made. I came downstairs to find my father at the kitchen table with his newspaper and coffee, the picture of ordinary morning as if the previous night had never happened. About last night, he began, not looking up from the financial section. Everyone was enjoying themselves until your dramatic exit. Your mother is upset. I'm leaving for Portland after Christmas, I said, simply pouring myself coffee. I've been offered a workshop apprenticeship. He finally looked up, eyebrows raised. Another hobby shop. A position with Julia Winters. She's well respected in the field. He searched my face for signs of uncertainty, finding none. This is about last night, one little joke, and you're moving across the country. This is about 34 years of little jokes. 34 years of being the family disappointment. 34 years of trying to earn approval for something you've never valued. That's ridiculous. We've supported you, paid for art school, let you move back home. Let me, I repeated, like it was a favor instead of what families are supposed to do. Help each other without keeping score. He folded his newspaper, precisely a man accustomed to controlling conversations. And how exactly will you afford this grand adventure? Portland isn't cheap. I've saved enough for the move and first month's rent. The position includes workshop access and training. I'll find additional work there. Sounds like a solid business plan, he said, sarcasm barely concealed. It's not a business plan. It's a life plan. There's a difference. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. I sold what furniture I couldn't take, closed my local accounts, said goodbye to the few friends I'd maintained in Boston. My mother watched these preparations with resigned worry, occasionally offering practical assistance. Vacuum bags for compressing clothing contacts in Portland. She'd researched a KA membership for the drive. David called from New York, bewildered by my decision. You're seriously doing this over one toast? It wasn't one toast, I tried to explain. It was the final toast. Allison visited pregnancy, making her unusually emotional. What about the baby? Don't you want to be here when your niece or nephew is born? I'll be back to visit. I promised, not entirely believing it myself. On my last night, my mother slipped into my nearly empty room and pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was $5,000 in cash. "Your emergency fund," she said, forestalling my objection. "Every adult needs one. This isn't about your furniture or Portland or anything else. It's just a mother making sure her daughter has options." I hugged her tightly, feeling the fragile bones beneath her sweater. For all her complicity in the family dynamics, she was trying in the only way she knew how. The morning of my departure, I loaded the last boxes into my Subaru. The car was packed efficiently. Essential tools secured in the back, clothing and personal items compressed into minimal space navigation set for Portland, Oregon, 3,052 miles west. My mother hugged me on the driveway, making me promise to text at every stop. My father shook my hand formally as if concluding a business meeting. "When this doesn't work out," he said, "there's always a place for you here." Not if. When. I smiled, suddenly pitying him and his certainty about how lives should unfold. "Goodbye, Dad." As I pulled away from the house that had never quite been home, I felt a peculiar mixture of terror and exhilaration. I was 34 years old and finally truly on my own. Not because I'd failed to launch properly, but because I was choosing a different trajectory entirely. 3,000 miles of road stretched before me. 3,000 miles of distance from expectations I could never meet. 3,000 miles toward a life that might be hard, but would undeniably be mine. The cross-country drive began in December, cold, my Subaru's heater working overtime against the New England winter. I headed west on I-90, watching the familiar Boston skyline recede in my rearview mirror. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Driving away from the rising sun toward uncertainty but also possibility. That first day I made it to upstate New York, checking into a budget motel just off the highway. Sitting on the thin bedspread, the enormity of my decision finally hit me. I was alone halfway between Christmas and New Year's, driving across a continent in winter, toward a job that barely paid, and a city where I knew no one. I called Leah, my closest friend from RISD, and the only person who'd unequivocally supported my decision to leave Boston. "I think I'm having a panic attack," I told her when she answered. "What am I doing?" "You're finally doing what you should have done years ago," she replied without hesitation. "Getting out from under that family shadow." "But what if I fail? What if I can't find an apartment? What if Julia hates my work?" "Then you'll figure it out. Like you always do. But at least you'll be failing on your own terms, not theirs." Her confidence steadied me. I slept fitfully, but woke determined to continue. Crossing into the Midwest brought flat expanses and big sky. I stopped in Cleveland to visit the Museum of Contemporary Art, finding unexpected solace in the clean lines and honest materials of their furniture collection. In Chicago, I detoured to the Art Institute, standing before their Nakashima pieces with reverence. This was craftsmanship that had changed how people thought about furniture. Not just functional objects, but sculptures for everyday life. Outside Des Moines, I struck up a conversation with a man at a truck stop who turned out to be a third-generation chairmaker. "Family business?" I asked, noticing his calloused hands similar to mine. "Was supposed to be," he said. "My brothers all went corporate. I'm the only one who wanted the shop." "Do your parents mind?" He laughed. "They think I'm crazy, but they respect that I'm keeping something alive that matters." "Must be nice," I said, the respect part. He studied me over his coffee cup. "Family don't get it." "Not even a little." "Well," he said, "some people can't see value unless it has a dollar sign attached. Their loss." The exchange was brief but fortifying. Confirmation that I wasn't alone in choosing a path others couldn't understand. Nebraska stretched endlessly, the winter landscape Spartan and beautiful in its simplicity. I played podcasts about design and craftsmanship, mentally cataloging techniques I wanted to try, approaches that resonated with my own aesthetic. In Wyoming, a sudden snowstorm forced me to stop. The interstate closed, and I found myself in a community center turned emergency shelter, along with dozens of other stranded travelers. An elderly woman named Margaret shared her sandwich with me. "Where you headed, dear?" she asked. Portland. Starting over. Running to or running from? The question startled me with its directness. Both, I guess. She nodded as if this made perfect sense. I left my husband in '57. Everyone said I was throwing my life away. Best decision I ever made. Were you scared? Terrified. Did it anyway. She patted my hand. Fear just means you're doing something that matters. When the storm cleared, the mountains rose before me, majestic and indifferent to human concerns. Driving through the passes, I felt my problems shrink in proportion. What was family disappointment against this ancient geology? What were career uncertainties compared to peaks that had witnessed civilizations rise and fall in Utah? My car developed an ominous rattle. The repair cost ate deeply into my budget, forcing me to sleep in the car for 2 nights, rather than pay for motels. Huddled under blankets in a Walmart parking lot, I almost called home. Almost admitted defeat before I'd even reached my destination. Instead, I found a coffee shop with Wi-Fi and applied for every Portland job I could find, from barista positions to retail work. Anything to supplement the workshop apprenticeship. I also created a simple website for my furniture, updating my portfolio with photos taken in better days. When my funds dwindled dangerously low, I found odd jobs along the way. Helping a gallery owner rearrange an exhibition in Salt Lake City, assisting an elderly couple with moving furniture in Boise. Small kindnesses and opportunities that provided just enough to continue west. The landscape changed dramatically as I approached Oregon. Lush forests replacing desert mist shrouding mountains, everything intensely impossibly green, even in winter. The air felt different in my lungs, heavy with moisture and possibility. I crossed the Columbia River on a rainy afternoon, the water below gray and choppy. Portland appeared through the mist, its bridges and hillside neighborhoods emerging like a vision. After 8 days and 3,052 miles, I had arrived. My apartment, found through one of Julia's connections, was a studio above a vintage clothing shop in the Alberta Arts District. 300 square feet with a kitchenette, a bathroom with temperamental plumbing and windows that let in north light, perfect for a small workspace. The rent took most of my remaining savings, but as I unloaded my car in the rain, I felt a certainty that had eluded me for years. This tiny space was mine. Not a childhood bedroom preserved in amber. Not a corner of someone else's garage. Mine alone, to fill with my work and my life on no terms but my own. That first night, I slept on a camping mattress on the floor, too exhausted to even set up the folding bed I'd brought. The street sounds were unfamiliar. Distant music, occasional laughter, the steady percussion of rain on the fire escape. I fell asleep to this new urban lullaby 3,000 miles from everything I'd known, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. My first morning in Portland, I woke to unfamiliar light filtering through windows without curtains. For a disorienting moment, I couldn't place myself. Then reality rushed back. The dinner, the decision, the drive, this tiny apartment with nothing but possibility and terror for company. I had scheduled to meet Julia Winters at her workshop at 10. With minimal unpacking accomplished, I showered in the temperamental bathroom, dressed in my most professional yet practical clothes, and headed out to find her studio in the industrial district. Winters Woodworking occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse, large windows revealing glimpses of machinery and works in progress. I stood outside for a moment, gathering courage before pushing open the door marked Studio. The space inside was cavernous and alive with activity. 3 people worked at different stations. A woman using a lathe, a man sanding a tabletop, another woman measuring and marking wood. The air smelled of sawdust, varnish, and possibility. "You must be Rosa." I turned to find a woman in her 50s approaching, wiping hands on a shop apron. Julia Winters was smaller than I'd expected from her outsized reputation, with silver-streaked hair, in a practical braid, and eyes that assessed me quickly. "Yes, thank you for the opportunity." She nodded briskly. "Your portfolio showed promise. Good technical skills. Now let's see your work ethic. We start at 7, finish when the day's work is done." You'll assist all of us with current projects while learning our processes. When you're ready, you'll get your own commissions through the studio. 20% of sales goes to overhead. Questions. The directness was refreshing after years of family conversations filled with subtexts and judgments. When do I start? Now. Put your things in that locker and I'll introduce you around. The workshop team became my first Portland community. Marcus specialized in traditional joinery with contemporary applications. Eliza was a sculptor who had transitioned to functional art. Danny handled the business side and created exceptional inlay work. And Julia oversaw everything with exacting standards and unexpected kindness. That first day, I swept floors, organized tools, and observed the others' work. By day's end, my back ached and my hands were rough with work, but the satisfaction ran deeper than exhaustion. Here my calluses weren't cause for concern or hand cream. They were badges of belonging. The workshop paid barely enough to cover basic expenses. I found additional work at a coffee shop 4 mornings a week before heading to the studio. Between the 2 jobs, I worked 70-hour weeks but still barely made rent. My tiny apartment slowly filled with found furniture. A table rescued from a curb, chairs from thrift stores, shelves made from reclaimed construction materials. Christmas arrived 2 weeks after my move. The workshop closed for 3 days, and I found myself alone in a new city while everyone else scattered to family gatherings. My phone held text messages from my mother. Careful, neutral communications about the weather, her holiday preparations, vague hopes I was settling in well. Nothing from my father. I spent Christmas Day walking through Portland neighborhoods, admiring decorations in windows that framed families celebrating together. The ache of isolation was real, but different from the loneliness I'd felt at the Harrison family table. This was circumstantial solitude, rather than fundamental invisibility. That evening, Julia surprised me by dropping off a small package, a handmade marking knife with my initials burned into the wooden handle. "First Christmas in a new place is always tough," she said simply. "Workshop crew has potluck dinner on New Year's Eve. You're expected." The New Year's gathering at Julia's Craftsman home introduced me to Portland's wider artisan community. Glassblowers, ceramicists, textile artists, all making lives through craft and creativity. I listened to their stories of struggle and breakthrough, noting how none measured success in dollar signs or status symbols. Winter in Portland brought constant rain and financial struggle. I learned to stretch ingredients, repair rather than replace. Find joy in small indulgences, like fresh bread, or an hour in a bookstore cafe. My mother's emergency fund remained untouched in my sock drawer. My stubborn pride refused to use it except in true crisis. The workshop became my sanctuary. Julia's teaching style was demanding but deeply instructive. She assigned me progressively more complex tasks, critiquing openly but constructively. "Your joinery is technically perfect but cautious," she observed one day. "You're making furniture like someone's watching over your shoulder, judging every move." The observation struck uncomfortably close to truth. "Try again," she said, "but this time, forget what anyone else would think of it. Make it for yourself." The small side table I created under this guidance became a turning point. Instead of the traditional symmetry my father had always praised in proper furniture, I followed the natural curve of the maple, creating an organic form that flowed from material rather than imposing rigid structure upon it. When finished, the piece had a quality I'd never achieved before. A quiet confidence, an integration of function and expression that felt authentically mine. Julia placed it in the workshop showroom without comment. Her highest form of approval. A small but significant moment came in February when a local restaurant owner purchased the table for his establishment's entryway. The sale was modest, but represented something profound. A stranger valued what I created enough to pay for it. No family connection, no sympathy. Purchase just genuine appreciation for the work itself. With Julia's encouragement, I began developing a signature style that merged traditional joinery with organic forms inspired by the Pacific Northwest landscape. My background in fine woodworking provided technical foundation, But Portland's creative environment pushed me to experiment beyond conventional furniture design. By spring, I had a small but growing client list. A tech entrepreneur commissioned a desk. A boutique hotel ordered side tables for their lobby. A local gallery included 2 of my pieces in a group exhibition of emerging artisans. Each small success built upon the last. Each month became slightly less financially precarious than the one before. I found better balance between coffee shop hours and workshop time. My apartment began to feel like home, decorated with items traded with other artists. A ceramic lamp for a small bookshelf, a woven wall hanging for a custom spice rack. I made friends who knew nothing of the Harrison family expectations, who took me at face value rather than as the disappointing youngest child. I dated briefly, finding connection without the shadow of family judgments coloring my self-perception. 1 year after my arrival, I took stock of my life. I was far from wealthy, but I was solvent. I had moved to a slightly larger apartment with enough space for a workbench. My furniture was beginning to attract attention beyond Portland with commissions from Seattle and San Francisco. Most importantly, I recognized myself again. Not as a failure by Harrison standards, but as a craftsperson of growing skill and vision. On the anniversary of my arrival, I began a special project. A dining table large enough for 8 people. Unlike traditional rectangular tables with their implicit hierarchy of head and foot, I designed mine circular with subtly different chairs that shared design elements but celebrated individual character. The wood came from a single fallen Oregon oak, each section revealing unique grain and color. I worked with these variations rather than attempting to minimize them, creating a surface that told its own story of growth and resilience. The table's base featured intertwining supports, each one necessary to the structure's integrity. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was sincere. Strength through connection, support through community, beauty through honest materials. When completed, the table caught the attention of Pacific Northwest Design Quarterly. Their feature article included photographs of the piece and an interview where I discussed my philosophy of furniture as both functional object and physical poetry. "Furniture holds our lives," I told the interviewer. "It's present for conversations, celebrations, arguments, quiet moments alone. Good furniture supports these experiences without demanding attention, yet rewards attention when it's given." The article concluded by noting my East Coast origins and training, mentioning that I'd found a more receptive home for my organic aesthetic in Portland's creative community. The day the magazine hit newsstands, I received my first email from my father in over a year. The message contained only 2 lines. "Saw the article. Interesting table." Not exactly a declaration of understanding or apology, but from Thomas Harrison it was practically effusive. I smiled at the screen but didn't respond immediately. Our relationship, if it was to be rebuilt, would need to be as carefully crafted as any piece of furniture, with attention to balance, function, and honest recognition of the materials at hand. 2 years after leaving Boston, my workshop position with Julia had evolved into a partnership arrangement. I maintained my own client list while contributing to larger studio projects, the arrangement providing both independence and community. My furniture designs had developed a waiting list with pieces now shipping to clients across the country. In April, I received an invitation to exhibit at the Pacific Northwest Design Showcase, a significant honor for someone relatively new to the region's craft scene. The exhibition would feature 10 pieces centered around the circular dining table that had become my signature work. Without overthinking, I sent exhibition invitations to my parents and siblings. I'd maintained sporadic contact with them over the past 2 years. Occasional phone calls with my mother, brief email exchanges with Allison and David, near silence with my father. The physical distance had created emotional space for relationships to recalibrate, but nothing had been resolved directly. I didn't expect them to come. The showcase coincided with a busy court schedule for my father. Allison had a 1-year-old now. David was perpetually between important meetings. It was more gesture than genuine invitation. A way of saying I was no longer hiding from them. A week before the exhibition, my mother called. "We've booked flights," she said without preamble. "Your father, me, Allison, Michael, and the baby. David can't make it. Something about a client crisis in London." I sat down abruptly on my workshop stool. "You're all coming to Portland. It's an important exhibition, isn't it? We should be there." The week before their arrival, I cleaned my apartment obsessively, though I'd booked them rooms at a downtown hotel. I prepared mentally for their presence, for the potential criticism, for the inevitable comparisons between my life and my siblings' more conventional success. The exhibition space was a renovated industrial building in the Pearl District, its brick walls and massive windows providing perfect backdrop for contemporary design. My collection occupied the main gallery. The circular dining set as centerpiece, surrounded by complementary pieces that expressed variations on my design philosophy. I arrived early on opening night, adjusting a chair angle here, polishing a surface there, trying to calm my nerves with methodical motion. Julia found me fussing over the already perfect table display. "They're just people, Rosa," she said correctly, guessing the source of my anxiety. "And this is exceptional work regardless of what anyone thinks." The exhibition opened at 7. Design professionals, collectors, and local art supporters filled the space quickly. I moved through introductions and conversations on autopilot, one eye always on the entrance watching for familiar faces. They arrived at 7:45. My mother, elegant in understated gray, my father uncomfortable but dignified in a suit that probably hadn't left Boston before Allison and Michael coordinated in business casual, the baby asleep in an expensive carrier. My mother embraced me warmly. Allison hugged me with genuine affection. My father offered a handshake that turned awkwardly into a brief, stiff hug. We stood in a circle of uncomfortable silence until my mother spoke. "Show us everything," she said. "We want to understand what you do." I led them through the exhibition, explaining my process, my material choices, my evolution as a designer. My mother asked thoughtful questions. Allison admired details with what seemed like genuine appreciation. My father remained largely silent, his lawyer's eyes taking in everything without revealing his thoughts. The evening's turning point came when Julia brought over Marika Carter, a prominent design critic whose opinion carried significant weight in the industry. "This table is remarkable," Carter said directly to me, unaware of my family listening nearby. "The balance between traditional craftsmanship and organic form is masterful. You've created something that feels simultaneously timeless and completely contemporary." She continued analyzing specific elements using technical terms my family wouldn't understand, but recognizing qualities that validated exactly what I'd been trying to achieve. My father listened intently, his expression shifting subtly as he processed this external validation of work he'd previously dismissed. After Carter moved on, we stood around the table in silence. My father ran his hand along the edge, feeling the wood with uncharacteristic care. "The grain pattern is extraordinary," he finally said. "You preserved it beautifully." Coming from him, it was monumental. Not just acknowledgement, but specific appreciation, showing he was actually seeing my work perhaps for the first time. "Thank you," I said simply. Later, as the event wound down, my father found me alone near the exhibition entrance. He seemed uncomfortable, adjusting his tie repeatedly. "Your mother says we should all have dinner at your apartment tomorrow night." "I'd like that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "I'm not good at this sort of thing," he continued, looking somewhere past my shoulder. "Admitting when I've been wrong." I waited, giving him space to find the words. "I didn't understand what you were trying to build," he finally said. "I thought you were choosing a harder path out of stubbornness. I didn't see that it was the only path that made sense for who you are." It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Thomas Harrison it was revolutionary. An admission of limited perspective, an acknowledgement of my autonomy. "Thank you for coming," I said. "It means a lot that you're here." He nodded briskly, emotion threatening his composure. "Well, the work is exceptional. Anyone can see that." The next evening, my family squeezed into my modest apartment. I'd spent the day preparing. Not just food, but mentally preparing for them to see my actual life, not the exhibition version. My mother brought wine. Allison chased her toddler around my living room. Michael helped in the kitchen. The center of the evening was my own dining table. Smaller than my exhibition piece, but built with the same philosophy, each seat equal, each person visible to all others. We ate salmon and roasted vegetables, drank Oregon Pinot Noir, and carefully navigated conversation that avoided the past in favor of the present. As we finished dessert, my father cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about your work, Rosa." The table quieted. Old tension threatened to resurface. The way you use wood, following its natural properties, rather than forcing it into predetermined forms. He looked at me directly. It takes more skill than the conventional approach, more sensitivity to the material. Coming from him, this was extraordinary recognition. "I work with what's there," I said. "The grain, the character, the natural resilience. Fighting those qualities never produces good results." The metaphor hung in the air between us, unspoken but acknowledged. After they left, I sat alone at my table, tracing the grain with my fingertips. The evening had not brought dramatic reconciliation or tearful apologies. The Harrison family didn't operate that way. But something had shifted. A recognition, however belated, that my path had led to something valid and valuable. The healing wasn't instantaneous or complete. 2 years of distance had begun the process, but true understanding would take more time. My father would likely never fully comprehend my choices. My mother would always worry about my financial security. My siblings would continue their conventional successes. But I had built something they could finally see. Not just furniture, but a life with integrity shaped by my own hands, according to my own vision. In the 2 years since that Thanksgiving dinner, I had traveled far beyond the 3,000 physical miles. I had journeyed from seeking external validation to finding internal certainty, from measuring myself against others' expectations to creating my own standards of success. Like the best furniture the journey had required, patience, attention to natural properties, and the courage to reveal what was already present, rather than imposing artificial structure. The result wasn't perfect, but it was authentic and strong, capable of supporting whatever came next. The table where my family had gathered that night represented everything I had learned. That everyone deserves their place, that beauty emerges from honesty, that the most enduring creations honor the natural character of their materials. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is to leave a table where you're not valued and build your own 3,000 miles away if necessary. Have you ever had to leave something familiar behind to find where you truly belonged? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding your path. And share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away and create your own space. Thank you for joining me at my table today. Until next time, remember that you never just take up space. You belong exactly where you are.